Greystone Technology CEO Peter Melby joins to discuss working with private equity from a seller's point of view, plus news from Kaseya and a new Mission Impossible that doesn't star Tom Cruise, plus a special guest interview with Rieva Lesonsky, founder and CEO of GrowBiz Media. It's ChannelPro Weekly number 173, The Ghost Kitchen. Hello and welcome to ChannelPro Weekly episode 173. My name is Matt Whitlock, technology editor, online director, and your host of this fine program for you. And when I say you, I am talking about the VARs, the MSPs, the IT integrators, all of those professions that involve a crap load of acronyms. You are the person for this show. If you are a oil driller in the fields of Texas, I said I was going to say digger and then driller, and I came out with drigger. So I just created a new title for a profession. By the way, guys, this is exciting stuff. But if you're one of those, you can still listen. We don't turn anybody away at the door here at ChannelPro Weekly. So welcome to one and all. But we are going to be talking about a lot of IT and small business related stuff and providing technology solutions to businesses. So that's kind of what we do here. Welcome one and all. Joining me this week and pretty much every week is my fantastic co-host, the man who rocks black on black like no one else, executive editor, Rich Freeman.
Well, hey, Matt, and for those of you who are watching on video, I'm here in front of my phony green screen background of an office because I miss the office so much that I'm pretending I'm in one right now. And
it's an awful lot of desks for one person, Rich.
Yeah.
Now, if that was your real office, would you like have a different desk for every day of the week?
Yeah, well, yeah, or time of day, depending on where the sun is and so on. Sure, why not?
Oh, so you're like my cat. You just follow the sun around the house so you can stay nice and warm with your. And you know what's funny? Like I just noticed that like you have like the black glasses too. Is that why you will pretty much always wear black? Is because if you change your shirt to a different color, you'll have to buy new glasses to match?
No. That is I honestly, why am I in a black T-shirt? 4 days out of 5. It's the same reason as anyone else who like Steve Jobs used to do this. It's like one less decision you have to make every day. You know what you're wearing when you get out of bed in the morning. It just makes life a little easier, and it looks professional, reasonably professional if you're traveling, and put a sport coat over it, and it works. It's easy.
Wow, there's actually a lot of logic behind that. That's kind of surprising because my wardrobe is like, which nerd T-shirt paired with which other shirt do I put together in combination? And I'm kind of comparing colors to make sure it kind of matches. I could make my life easier and I can't do black because that's your thing. So maybe I just won't wear shirts anymore, and then I don't have to worry about it.
Well, I don't know. I think the button down over the nerd shirt is your signature look. I would not get away. You've got a look. Stick with it.
Rich, who else has a signature look as well is a man who wears kind of like these cool, they're not like Hawaiian, but they're like kind of patterny button down shirts. And what do you know? He's here with us today. I'm super excited to introduce our guest host of this particular episode. He's the CEO of Greystone Technology, a Denver-based 6-time Inc. 5000 honoree and a 6-time top workplace winner. He's been named one of Colorado's top 25 CEOs, 40 under 40, and a ChannelPro 2020 visionary. His leadership at Greystone led to 17 consecutive years of growth and consistent recognition for market innovation. Please welcome the one, the only, Peter Melby. Welcome, Peter.
Hey, thanks for having me, Matt and Rich. Rich, I do buy into that idea of lessening your options so that you have one fewer decision to make in the morning. So I only own one shirt and I just wear it every day. It doesn't have to be black and boring. And oh, sorry, did I say that?
No, I think that's a next level solution to the problem there. Yeah, just the one shirt.
Also, my background here is my actual office. It's not a fake background. And like Rich's, there's no one else in it, So it's I have, as you're saying, a desk for not just every day of the week, I think, but for every day of the pandemic. And just rotate, but it's a little more comfortable than my basement, and it's bigger. So that's and I missed it enough that I decided that I would just come hang out here by myself.
That's a big space. Is it weird to be somewhere outside of the house, or have you been going there pretty much every day for the last year?
I've been going there. I took a couple months in the spring and stayed home. And then I was home, I guess, for most of summer. When my kids went back to school, still in our house, I started coming here more often just to get a little bit of quiet, to give them a little bit, of space, and make sure that there wasn't just one more person running around the house. And I don't have kids like running on the floor above, which is really, really nice here in the office. So I'm here, a few days a week just for that change of pace.
That's awesome. So if you can, I mean, you've been on with us before, and so previous episodes, and those who have listened to maybe some of those kind of know a little bit about you, but I'm sure we have a lot of new listeners today. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and your amazing background? I mean, you're a very, very successful person, so I'm sure you could go on forever, but tell us what you do at Greystone and kind of how you got to where you are.
Yeah, so I am, I own an MSP. I run the MSP here in Denver. And Greystone Technology has almost 100 employees. We've been around for 20 years. We'll turn 20 on April 1st of 2021. So we're excited about that. And
you founded a business on April Fool's Day, Peter?
Yeah, I kind of by accident. I don't know. Well, I also founded a business in 2001. So I don't know which was more foolish, but we've grown, relatively organically, but our big focus has been, bringing the human approach to IT, and what we say a lot is, we used to say, we're a people first IT company, or, a human focused IT company. But I think what we've learned over the years is that all IT companies, if you're providing services to people, are people focused. Some embrace it, and really, understand and become a student of how to do that. And some people resist it and really still want to work on the technology. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of the division and struggle in the market. So I love the industry as much as I think we have a lot of things backwards, that we've done over the past 25 years that should be corrected. And so it's that joint mission of how do we make this more effective than we traditionally have been, at the same time that we're recognizing and embracing what makes this community so unique and beneficial.
I'm curious to follow up on some of the things that we've been doing backwards in the industry, but the thing I really want to kind of get into with you is some very exciting news that your company broke about 2 months ago, when you announced that you had become a part of New Charter Technologies. And I'll have you explain what New Charter is and their relation to private equity and so on. But I mean, we actually had a private equity investor on the podcast with us at some point last year to talk about the phenomenon of private equity investing in MSPs from the investor point of view. We really haven't had anybody on the show who is, from the MSP side of that transaction, can kind of speak to what it's about. So, for me personally, and I'm sure a lot of people in the audience, it's just a really interesting opportunity to kind of get that inside point of view on how this whole thing happened. But I mean, just to start things out, tell people a little bit about New Charter and what it is exactly you announced in November.
Yeah, so I'll start a step before that, because I probably need to acknowledge some of the things that I've said publicly, and even on a lot of stuff that ChannelPro has done, is that I have not been a fan of private equity investing in MSPs. I'm on the record of saying that I don't think it's by and large a healthy thing. And so I got a lot of notes when we announced this investment, because it is private equity backed. And there's some people, someone said, well, did you change your mind or did you sell out? And it's interesting, because I think that I was like, maybe both, but no, I think that in talking through the details of it, you realize that I haven't really changed my tune in terms of what I think is damaging, about private equity in the MSP space, but recognizing that there's a there are differences, there are opportunities out there that preserve the elements that I think are most critical. And so New Charter Technologies is a portfolio within Oval Partners, which is a Bay Area based small equity group. Oval really only invests in two industries, MSPs and managed print. And New Charter Technologies, is overseen by Mitch Morgan, who I've known, for the better part of a decade, in the channel. We've done a lot, we've done presentations together, and we've actually connected on what we see as a lot of the failures of M&A, in this space. And the thing that we've connected on that we still believe is that people, investment groups that are purely financially based look at MSPs and see a gold mine, because we check all the boxes. We're technology companies, so it's new and interesting. It's not archaic. We have recurring revenue. It's a growing industry, and honestly, most MSPs are not run by highly trained business operators. Were homegrown. I was 20 when it started. Certainly didn't know all the ins and outs of the financial aspects of business and operations and all of those things. And I think most MSPs come from a similar background of people who recognize there's an opportunity in front of me and I'm going to go capture that. So private equity groups look at it and say, we can take two MSPs and 2 + 2 = 5 because we can add in all of our expertise. The reality of it is that I think a lot of equity groups that are looking at the numbers on paper see that, eventually find out that 2 + 2 naturally equals 3, because we're a very relational, very, connection-driven organization, and it's highly personal. And so even at Greystone's scale, it's still a very personal organization. I know our employees, I know our clients, our employees know our clients. Those connections matter. And when you disrupt that by saying, okay, we're going to smash these 2 companies together, or these 4 companies together, or whatever it is, and get the returns on that, the returns don't happen the way the equity groups want. And then they this is an overgeneralization, but they tend to do what they know how to do. And that's, well, if we're not growing, then we have to cut costs. Or if we're not growing, then we have to replace the sales leaders and drive a different sales engine and, and do all of these things without really focusing on the fact that what we need in these businesses is to still build through the same conduits that we built through from the start, which is people. And so for that reason, I've looked at it in our market. We love it when someone gets acquired, because what the fallout from that is typically beneficial to us. We get new customers that are unhappy. We get employees that are disenfranchised by the situation that they're in. So when we looked at our situation, and like most MSPs, that are growing, I think we counted, we had, in the past 2 years, we had over 400 different people or organizations reach out to us, about investment or acquisition. And I have no interest in moving on. I have no interest in moving on from my role, but I am constantly interested in how do we do this better? How do we evolve from where we're at, and how do we do it in a healthy way? And so as I stayed connected with Mitch Morgan, over the years, and we shared these ideas, he said, maybe there's another way to do this. And so the premise of New Charter Technologies is that it's a portfolio, of organizations that Oval invests in. We all still run independently. We have, more or less an elevated peer group where we look at it and say, okay, we're in different regions. So we're not competitive. We're not trying to integrate on the front end of this. We're not trying to smash things together or pretend that we're the same. We're naturally, just like, an HCG peer group or something like that, connecting and building relationships with each other and finding the economies of scale and the benefits, of that, while we each continue our individual growth trajectories that are really propelled by the same things that they've always been propelled by. So that's what was really interesting to us, is that this situation doesn't, it doesn't commit the cardinal sin in my mind of cutting your legs out from under you by saying, okay, now we're going to take this business that's been built in this organic fashion, and we're gonna apply this new formula to it, and it's just gonna work because that's how business works. I think MSPs are different when it comes to that. So we were interested for that reason. Where we really got excited about it is when we got into the deal and recognized that number one, most of this wasn't an exit plan for my partner and I. It's not an exit plan. We see this as an opportunity to do something bigger. We also saw an opportunity to diversify some risk. As we were holding all of the liability within the two of us, to have backing, and support in that from a larger entity, from a larger group. We recognize that it's made us better leaders. It's given us, the comfort level and the foundation to make better decisions where I'm not, constantly worrying about the doomsday fallout of any little decision I make. So all of those things were, and then being able to watch other organizations go through their process, because some of the other companies in the portfolio are ones that I've been connected to, and known over the years, and seeing that it is the real deal. Made it so that my future is still invested in this. We've mitigated some risk, and we've created more stable opportunities for our team. And my job's more fun because now I get to contribute to other organizations as well with what we're doing, not just the day in, day out of my organization. So that's where I realized that my fundamental views have stayed the same. I think that there's a reason why these things are not working the way that a lot of equity groups want them to, if they're honest with themselves. But being able to understand that means that we can look at it a different way too and go that direction.
So, cycle three, there were a number of different, well, and first of all, I should ask, I mean, was this something that you were looking for previously, as some opportunity to join forces with other MSPs or some organization, but you wanted to do it in the right way? Or did New Charter come to you and say, hey, here's an opportunity we want you to consider?
Yeah, so we have this kind of running commentary within the New Charter portfolio, is that we're only interested in organizations that are not interested in selling, or not interested in taking investment. Because the ones that are trying to do that oftentimes are the ones that are propping up their businesses in an irresponsible way to show something, to an equity group or a private buyer that then, ends up not being true. So the same was true for us. We were not in a position where we were looking, specifically for this type of a situation. There were two things that we were looking for. And one was, how do we do something bigger, than what we're doing? And I didn't necessarily have the appetite, to increase, my risk, profile by going and planting Greystone in other markets. I also, wasn't, arrogant or brash enough to think that I could just do that, just enter a brand new market. We didn't have relationships and immediately succeed. So, recognizing that we didn't want to start from the ground up in some of those spaces, but when we were looking for something bigger, led us to just a lot of the peer conversations about what does the future of this look like? And that really helped. And then the other part of it, like I said, was just a recognition of the diversification of risk, and the fact that, as bootstrap businesses, in a lot of ways, we build, we build in ways that might not create the healthiest foundation, because we can only look, 2 months ahead. We can't look 2 years ahead, because, we can't invest 2 years ahead, because, that money's coming in month to month. Most MSPs start, living paycheck to paycheck, or, invoice to invoice. And so really being able to break that cycle and think about what investment looks like over time is something that I think that the MSP industry does need more of. And so that, as we started to think about that, and recognize that this situation, as they approached us, really had, a thread, through each of those things that we considered important.
So in this particular case, so you found a an organization with a business model that is appealing to you, but I mean there have to be trade-offs as well. So I mean, for somebody who is in the audience, right, and as I understand it, if you're a reasonably successful MSP, the phone is constantly ringing. Somebody is offering to buy you. What kind of advice would you give people in terms of the trade-offs that they just need to be aware of? There are you've kind of listed some of the pros in your particular situation, but what are maybe some things that might be a problem for some people? How do they kind of think their way through? Do I or do I not want to do this?
Yeah. So I think in our case, the most important thing is that performance still matters on the other side. And I think that there's a sentiment, especially with some burned out MSP owners or MSP owners that are really tired of the grind, that I'll sell, in order to cash out, or I'll take investment, in order to cash out, and I'm going to prop my business up however I need to do in order to make that happen. In my mind, any successful deal has to have success on the other side. So we had plenty of people, and they're looking at how at Greystone, and really wanting to understand what it would look like, for us to sell to them. But it quickly became a question for my partner and I of, well, how much would someone have to pay us for us to sit and watch them destroy what we spent 20 years building? And I'm sure there's a number, but we didn't find it, and we didn't push for it either. I mean, we're not done. This means a whole lot more to us than it does, to any investor. So I think that's probably the biggest piece of advice that I can give people is, if you're interested in taking an investment, connecting with private equity or even exiting, do it based on the reality of your organization. So first spend the time to invest in the health. Don't invest in the image. I mean, obviously, brand and all that's important, but don't put, just a shiny exterior on something that really isn't good, because it's going to be exposed. It's going to be exposed in the market, and it's going to be painful for everybody. The employees, the clients, and the investment group, as well as the founders. And so that was really helpful for me. I got that advice, and someone said, just make your business great, and not perfect, because none of them are, but be honestly proud of what you've built, and go seek or connect to the idea of investment based on that, not based on if I can eke out this margin, then it'll be worth it for me. And so it really is that there's no substitute for just substance and performance and quality. And I know people who have found exit plans in probably a tier above what the reality of their business worth was. And like I said, it's not fulfilling. It's not pain-free. You don't just get away from that and say, all right, I won. So that was something that we just continued to realize, is that, in this space, we want to, it's about continuing what we're doing, not stopping what we're doing and doing it a different way. The other things that I would really encourage people to look at is the motivations of the group, and how closely connected to the outcomes, of this, the financing parties are. We're very fortunate to have good relationships with the partners who have put their money into this, and that's a critical piece, because if you don't understand the motivations of everybody, then it's hard to understand what the vision is. And then it's true that a dollar just becomes a dollar is a dollar is a dollar, and I don't think that there's a lot of success in that for MSPs. And finally, I would consider the personal future of the founder and the team. I get that there's the exit plans are something that a lot of MSP founders are focused on. And I can't knock that. I definitely understand that, as an option for us. It's very different, if we're going to continue to drive the success of this, than if we were looking at this as, either moving on to a new career, or retirement in some capacity. So I think that if that's your motivation, then you probably got to look at it, a little bit differently. So I'm sure there are 100 more things to think about as well, but those were paramount for us.
So one thing that I want to ask you to comment on is the last couple of years we've seen a lot of consolidation in MSPs. We've seen, just MSPs being larger by acquiring, and we're seeing a lot of these kind of partner groups, some with larger aspirations, kind of building more of a national brand, and then just some partnership groups amongst various regional MSPs to kind of operate more efficiently. If I was operating an MSP today, or if you're going to talk to somebody who's operating an MSP today, who's in one market, fairly successful but small, like, do you think that joining a partner group kind of like this is going to be kind of necessary for MSPs to compete going forward?
Yeah, I think that I don't know that this is the specific prescription for everybody, but I will say that I think it's a great time to be a relatively mature MSP. And I think it's a really challenging time to be an immature MSP. And that doesn't necessarily equate to size. But size is definitely a part of it. There's, right now businesses need mature IT. They need comprehensive solutions, which is multifaceted, and you need different aspects that you build in, into these organizations. And we see that businesses, especially first quarter of this year, are more willing than ever to entertain leveling up their IT, and, we have a whole theme, we talk about what it means to graduate to Greystone, and that's really where we've built our company to be, is a graduation point from, a traditional, smaller MSP, or even a traditional, small IT department. And so I think that we do need to learn what that scale brings to our customers. Security is a great example, but it's a very difficult space right now to just, you can't fake it when it comes to security. You can't, say that you're doing things that you're not. The stakes are too high. The risks are out there, and you'll be exposed. I mean, it's hard enough to do it right. And so I do think that it's one of the things that New Charter offers that is extremely beneficial. I think there are probably other ways to partner through things. And it doesn't mean that it's the wrong time to start an MSP. I think it's the wrong time to start an MSP and think it's going to be really easy.
So very, very interesting stuff. And it'll be interesting to kind of learn about kind of your experience with this as you go forward. I don't always like to go backwards, but the last time we had you on was kind of in April, and it was kind of right in the peak of the stay-at-home orders. Everything was rolling out. Everybody was at home. And PPP money was kind of being doled out, and you started a stimulus pledge that you came on and you talked about that. I wanted to circle back with it because I remember talking about that, and you were going through that. I wanted to do a follow-up. Like, was that successful? How did that go? Tell people about what you tried to do.
Yeah, so it was basically a pledge within the industry to recognize that MSPs were specifically benefited by the PPP. And I think, especially at the beginning of that, I heard some chatter within the industry of, kind of that almost looking at it as an owner bailout type thing, instead of really a company bailout. And like, okay, great, I can do all these things that, personally, or all of that. And it really, I looked at it and said, okay, if we're going to be uniquely benefited by this, as an industry, this can really help us level up. And so, there were almost 100 organizations that connected into that. We built some great camaraderie around it, and it was just a pledge, that for that future season, we would not reduce our staffing sizes, and after that we reduced ours by about 4%, and so admittedly, but it would have been significantly higher than that if we had just looked at trends during that time. And so it was something where, because we were built for massive growth this year. And so I think that what it allowed us and a lot, and most of the people who used it responsibly to do is recognize that if we can keep our teams through this dip, and it did end up being, a dip. The slowdown, it carved $2 million out of our plan for the year. But it did it, the way that the PPP came in allowed us to protect more positions. And then we ended up hiring, as things came back, another 10 people, between then and now. And so it's been, the impact of it has been exactly what we wanted to. And it was really just a show of solidarity with our peers to say, yeah, you know what? We're not known for being a people-focused industry all the time. So let's show that we're doing this together. We're doing this the right way.
So I love to ask questions like this because I find it interesting. Because I find in a lot of my experience, a lot of people don't do what they say they're going to do. So did anybody sign the pledge? You don't have to name names, but did anybody sign the pledge just to look good who didn't do anything that they pledged and went ahead and cut their workforce by 50%?
I don't think so. And I trust that wasn't the case. We had a few people reach out to say, oh, okay, you're starting this. How are you holding people accountable? Like, that's not my thing. Like, we need to be able to live by our word. I think that, and it's why I share honestly about the fact that we did end up, reducing staff a little bit in areas where we weren't seeing the performance, that we needed to. I also think that on the heels of that, that was a very quick thing that we said, hey, let's get this out there. And then as the guidance and rules came out around PPP, it really kind of enforced that. And I'm glad it did. I mean, that was the purpose of it. But it would have been hard to really get the benefits of that not following the pledge. So it ended up, being something that, I don't think anyone looks at it and say, wow, they really went out of their way to be, supportive of their teams. If they look at it and say, yeah, the government mandated that too. But I do think that the early message around that was really beneficial for our teams to hear. It was beneficial for, the other teams, that signed it. That's a lot of the feedback that we got, is that it was there was a lot of pride, and security, that it brought during the worst parts, of the economic challenge for MSPs. And so for that, I'm very proud of it.
Yeah, it was a great effort and good stuff. And I look forward to seeing what your next pledge is that make people sign.
Yeah, me too.
Perhaps it'll be pledging to buy Girl Scout cookies from one of my kids. That'd be good.
I'm not a Girl Scout cookie fan.
So it doesn't have quite the importance that the stimulus pledge had, but it's still...
I don't know that we get the response,
That's awesome. All right. Well, Peter, thank you so much for being with us. It's a great story, great, interesting stuff. And we've got a couple other stories we're going to talk about. So I'm glad you're going to be here with us the whole time to get your thoughts and share what you think about these. So we're going to go ahead and pivot and go to the news. Now, Rich, after last week was CES week. I mean, it was news story on top of news story on top of news story. It was ridiculous how many press releases there was to go through. We got one story this week. Usually there's a little lull right after CES because all of the PR and marketing people and every tech company after CES, they just kind of like flop back in their chair and go like this for a week. Yeah. And for those listening, I just flopped back in my chair and looked like I was dead. So, Rich, we do have one story, though. Kaseya is unveiling what? They're in the news. What's going on with Kaseya?
And just to your point, Matt, this is actually a story from last week, which we didn't get to because I wanted to focus exclusively on hardware last week. But yeah, this isn't even this week's news. So last week, Kaseya announced something that they are calling their Unified Remote Monitoring and Management framework. And essentially, it is an architecture, a framework that they are building into VSA, their RMM system. This is mostly forward-looking at this point, but this ties into something we've been talking about a lot on the podcast, which is just the fact that RMM tools like VSA were originally designed to manage endpoints, manage hardware, And MSPs today are responsible for managing a whole lot more than that. And so what Kaseya is looking to do with Unified RMM, as they call it, is equip VSA to help MSPs manage all the stuff that they're increasingly responsible for, including software as a service applications, infrastructure as a service resources, mobile devices, mobile endpoints, smartphones and tablets, Internet of Things devices that maybe can't accommodate an agent. All of that, eventually, all of that will be built in. The ability to monitor and manage all of that will be built into VSA via this unified RMM framework that they announced, along with the ability to view and manage Azure Active Directories for your clients as well, all through the centralized interface, multi-tenant, et cetera. Now, I from Kaseya's point of view, I mean, you can imagine why Kaseya would be interested in doing this. We've been talking on the show to the CEOs of startups that are just doing cloud management. And there's a huge recognition in the industry that challenge is something that MSP, we had Jameson West on the show recently saying, I don't really need an RMM system anymore if I'm an MSP. What I really care about is the ability to manage my cloud resources and so on. So if you're Kaseya, you need to make that pivot and stay relevant to your MSPs. And by adding that functionality into the RMM tool alongside the endpoint management functionality that was already there, you're essentially letting or sparing, let's say, an MSP from having to go out and buy 2 or 3 or 4 different systems to manage everything they need to manage for their customers, right? You don't need the mobile device management tool and the RMM tool, the traditional RMM tool, and the cloud management tool. We're going to build all of that into VSA for you and give you a way to do that in one place. So, last observation will just quickly be, I had a sort of off-the-record exchange with a mutual friend of ours about this last week, who was less, interested in this than I was, because from his point of view, he called it futureware. Like they're saying they're going to do all these things. Let's see if they can actually do it, and then I'll get interested. And of course, they've got to follow up. They've got to execute. Some of the functionality that I described there is supposed to arrive this quarter. A lot of it shows up supposedly this summer, and we'll be keeping an eye on that. But from my point of view, it's just one more piece of evidence that these sort of incumbent monitoring and management companies are paying more attention to the wider range of management needs that their partners have. And Datto said at some point late last year they're going to invest or increase their R&D spending on cloud management 40% this year. We're seeing the signs that these companies are trying to keep up with the times, and we'll see how they do.
Yeah, I know. When the guest you're alluding to, we were talking a lot about identity management is kind of like the future. I see some stuff in here about Azure Active Directory. Is it more comprehensive than that, or is it just are they doing anything here around the identity management part?
Yeah, well, the Azure Active Directory piece of that is incorporating access management into the RMM tool.
Okay, so I'll turn it over to Peter because as an MSP, you've worked with a lot of RMM systems and you kind of know what the needs are. Obviously, this is, as Rich said, kind of futureware, but does it sound interesting to you?
Absolutely. I think that, we haven't seen a lot of major innovation in the RMM space. And we've seen a lot of changes in the technology. And so to what you're saying, about what Jameson said, a lot of MSPs are looking at this and saying, well, do I need RMM in all of these spaces? And I think that it is up to those vendors, especially the ones that are well-funded and are trying to drive the innovation, of the industry to push us forward, not hold us back, on legacy platforms. I love the futureware term that you mentioned, because that's my concern, is the fact that it's one thing to come out and announce these things. But if we look at the track record of, some of these vendors, it doesn't always deliver. And my concern will be if they try to meet these dates by giving the idea that it does these things and it doesn't actually create the value and purpose. And I'm not saying that will be the case, but I think that's the major risk with coming out this early and saying this is what we're going to be releasing is that yes, it's great in theory, if it's usable, if it's valuable. And I think that we used to compare Apple and Microsoft a lot, way back in the day when Apple, Microsoft would come out and say, all right, 9 months from now, we're going to release this version, a new version of Office. It's going to have all of these features, and then you wait 9 or 10 months. And then, 18 months later, it comes out. And then 3 months after that, it's stable. And, and then Apple would be the company that would have a release. And then, 2 weeks later, you could have the device, or sometimes the next day. And I think that it's, you've seen Microsoft adopt a lot more of that mentality, under a new CEO and their new cloud platforms and all of that, where they come out and say, all right, this is here now. Teams now does this. We've integrated this, we've built this, and it's pretty immediate. So I like the fact that that for a lot of the players, it's really, pushed towards that idea of we tell you what we've already done, not what we're going to do. So in this case, I wouldn't be surprised if they're not the only one who's innovating, along these spaces. And maybe they get a bump, and some notice because they're able to share that ahead of time. But I won't say I'm skeptical. I'm anxious, for the proof of that value, not just from Kaseya specifically. This isn't about them individually, but from that vendor market, from those organizations that we rely on for these things.
Yeah, it's a really great point, because one of the things that was interesting to me about this announcement is that it's kind of out of keeping for Kaseya. Like, Kaseya has been in the news a lot in recent years for acquisitions that they've made of companies like Rapid Fire Tools and ID Agent and so on. And the thing they do every time they make an acquisition is they complete the deal, they sign it. They don't tell anybody about it until they actually have something to show for it. So instead of saying, hey, someday we're going to build ID Agent functionality into, they wait until they've actually done at least some integration and they have something tangible to offer their partners. In this case, they kind of got out in front a little bit and they said, here's something that we are going to do for you in the future. And I mean, I don't know, the reasoning behind that. I wonder, I suspect some of it might be an awareness on their part that there are these startups coming along. MSPs are dealing with some of these challenges. They're starting to look around. So we need to get the word out ASAP that we're on this. And that's, but to your point, I mean, now they've said we're going to do something. And so now they have to do it, and because people will be waiting to see. And then it's one thing to hit your release dates and to keep the roadmap milestones going, but they not only have to do it, but they have to do it well, or else they're back where they were to begin with. So definitely an interesting move on their part in that respect.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point that they, it's hard to change RMMs. It's a pretty big barrier. What I think that, because of that, I can see them seeing the risk of, if I just let people know what's happening, then that's going to stave off any anxiety or any motivation to look at changing to a new, more modern platform. So in that case, I can see it as a big, a very smart decision to announce it. But to your point, as long as then they follow through and they need to.
So Peter, do you think that now that Kaseya has kind of said, oh, look, we are recognizing this need, Rich, you can weigh in on this too. Are we going to see some similar kind of announcements from the other RMM makers in the coming weeks or months, so that way they can also look like they're in the game too?
It's a good question. I think, it'll be interesting to see what strategy each of them takes. I doubt that there's anyone who's not actively working on these things. I don't think anyone's blind enough to look at it and see, oh wait, we need cloud management in our RMM. That would be a benefit. So I think that, I don't even know what I would do, in those shoes. You certainly don't want to to be the ones that are looking like you're lagging behind. So maybe that was also, you know, the strategy around this for Kaseya. But you know, yeah, I think there probably is a good chance that we'll see that it'll open up more communication about what's happening, you know, with specific product roadmaps, even for those organizations who want to take more of that, you know, let's announce it after we did it kind of approach.
Yeah, well, and actually, Rich, it says here in the article, I remember we talked about this, but Datto has already kind of announced that they're putting a lot of money into cloud management research, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I like I said before, late last year at an online conference they said that the cloud management, you know, development budget basically will be 40% larger this year. And they have, you know, to my knowledge, they haven't made any, you know, specific promises about what they're going to release when and so, but yeah, it's very much on their radar. And like, you know, you said, Peter, I'm sure, you know, ConnectWise, SolarWinds, I mean, how could they not be thinking about that now? And so, I think it's going to be a very interesting year, 2021, for cloud management and security specific startups. And I think it'll also be an interesting year to see how effectively and how quickly these companies that have been in this business for a while can begin to incorporate some of that functionality in their tools before people maybe start, you know, moving on to these other platforms.
Yeah, we will have to keep an eye out on that and see what they do. But we are going to. That's kind of it for the news. And Rich, you know what? I didn't even realize that it was kind of last week's news. So really, the PR people are on vacation this week after a long CES, taking naps and sitting on well, they're probably not sitting on a beach somewhere. They're probably sitting in their home office looking at a picture of a beach, wishing that they were on a beach. But we do have another story we're going to talk about. It's called Mission Impossible: Forecasting Tech in 2021. Now, is this a new movie starring Tom Cruise, or is this something else? Because that seems like a really weird title for a Mission Impossible movie.
Yeah. I don't know that that Tom Cruise would be, you know, picking up that screenplay and thinking this is a winner. Forecasting Tech in 2021. No, this is something different. There is no Tom Cruise involvement in this at all. But so this was our cover story on our January issue. You know, every year the cover story in January is our tech preview story. And it's Mission Impossible, of course, because it feels like forget about the industry, like the entire world changes every 2 weeks now, right? So normally I go out and I interview a bunch of experts and I say, what do you expect for next year? And they kind of confidently tell me, well, here's some stuff that's coming up. This time, you know, I was almost embarrassed to ask, like, you know, predict the future. Nobody knows exactly what to expect, but I did manage to find 7 brave experts who are willing to make some prediction. Go out, you know, because I certainly wasn't. So I found some other people who were. And I'll just run through a few things. There are 7 different sort of corners of the industry, portions of the industry that we got into. I'll just hit some highlights. So in security, for example, I spoke with Ian Thornton Trump, who is one of my favorite, most knowledgeable, most interesting go-to security experts. And I've heard this prediction actually from others. He's not the only one who has made this point, but you know, as we all know, giant, very, very rapid rush into work from home computing early-ish in 2020. The objective was just to get everybody online and keep them online. But from a security standpoint, you know, that was sort of an afterthought initially, and people did things that, you know, were not wise. And so a big storyline in 2021, Ian and others predict, will be fixing that. That there will be a lot of customers and a lot of IT partners who are kind of going back into those work from home environments and trying to make them more secure. That extends to the other, you know, a big piece of the whole work from home phenomenon was this acceleration of cloud computing adoption. And when I spoke with Lauren Nelson from Forrester about the cloud market, she said cloud security she thinks is going to be a giant phenomenon in 2021, precisely because everybody sort of, sped up how quickly they were bringing software as a service, infrastructure as a service into the company. Now, all of a sudden, they're realizing I've got to, figure out how to make sure I'm doing this safely. And so we're going to see a lot there. There are always predictions, and Lauren actually pointed this out. In her role, she's constantly coming up against people who are predicting that the growth arc in cloud is going to start leveling off. And she said, yeah, not so much this year. There was obviously a giant growth spurt last year, but Forrester is looking, just in the public cloud infrastructure market, they're expecting a 35% growth rate this year to $120 billion. So that will not be slowing down anytime soon. And then the other thing she pointed to, which I thought was really kind of interesting, is as offices begin to reopen, and you are in more of a hybrid kind of environment where on any given day, some people are in the office, some people are at home, businesses are going to have to kind of figure out how to facilitate communication in that kind of hybrid environment. And you're going to see more tools and training resources and so on. How do we run a meeting in which 4 people are here in the office and 3 people are in Zoom, and we want everybody to feel like they're equally sort of included and able to contribute? We won't get into the details, but I actually wrote a news story earlier this week, I think, from Epson, announcing some new projectors that they had launched, one of which was really kind of tailored to that need. It's designed, it's a laser powered device. You're supposed to, use it with like a 70 or an 80-inch screen. And the idea is you'll have enough real estate there to have an interactive whiteboard, but also be able to see who else, in thumbnails, who else is on the line in Zoom, and enhanced camera, enhanced microphones so that you can all hear and see. There's going to be a lot more of that kind of thinking done about how do we make a hybrid environment work.
So what you're saying, Rich, is that in order to feel kind of equal in a meeting, the larger your head on a screen, the more equal you are.
Yeah, exactly. That would be the tip, is to get right up in front of the camera there, and your presence will be unavoidable.
That's my favorite part of virtual meetings is if you have an 80-inch screen, that make sure that you're the only person on the screen, and then you dominate the meeting. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, make sure you wash your face before you.
Yeah. Let's see what else. Oh, so another, from a cloud standpoint, people wonder, well, we had that giant spurt of growth last year. Does that tail off? Probably not, is what we're hearing from Forrester. Similar sort of thoughts out there right now about the hardware market. There was a lot of buying last year, people looking to get their work from home employees on newer laptops in particular. And so some, concern out there is maybe 2021 a slower year, given that buying cycle just happened. We spoke last week with Stephanie Halford from Intel, who felt like, probably you're probably going to see continued purchasing all the way through the year. I spoke with Rob Enderle, an analyst, one of my favorite analysts to go to. It's always an interesting conversation. And he thinks the first 6 months of this year, you're going to see continued growth and momentum in hardware. He's waiting to see what the second half of the year looks like. For that reason that I just cited, it's just an awful lot of purchasing that's happened at this point in the last 10 months or so, and he's wondering if the industry can sustain it or not. And you know what? I'll stop there. I could go on. We have predictions for managed services and storage and digital signage, but I'll pause there and let you guys chime in.
So, Peter, I'm going to turn it right to you.
Yeah.
What do you think of some of those predictions?
I think it sounds fairly accurate to me. Unlike the people who are unsure of what's happening, I'm confident that I know exactly what's going to happen. That's a joke. But I think that if you look at what we've seen historically, it's that we rush to diagnose trends and say this is going to happen really fast. 10 years ago, I was told that the cloud, everyone would be in the cloud in 2 years. It's not the reality of things. And even with the fact that most businesses have had to reorient somehow during the pandemic, and it has accelerated, the digital transformation in a lot of ways. There are still plenty of businesses who are just hanging on by a thread during this time when it comes to their infrastructure and the way that they've worked through it. So I think we will probably see the tail end of that cloud growth faster because of the pandemic. I agree that I think it's going to the growth is going to continue this year. The opportunities are going to continue, and my personal view, and I'm anxious to see what you say about managed services. But like I said, it's a really good time to be knowledgeable about how to do these things, because there's still more and more companies that need what we do from an innovative standpoint. And I think that's the opportunity, and the thing that we can all be excited about.
Yeah, go ahead, Rich.
Well, I'll just quickly follow up on the managed services piece of the story a little bit, because I spoke for that part of the article with Paul Dipple of Service Leadership. And one of the many reasons I always enjoy speaking with him is he's not just sort of looking into the crystal ball. He's not speculating. He has this amazing database of information that he collects from thousands of MSPs on a quarterly basis, and so he can actually kind of see what's going on. And a couple of things there. So like you we're talking about how this is actually a pretty good time to be an MSP if you know what you're doing and so on. And he was citing some numbers to me that in aggregate MSPs actually did reasonably well last year. It's and I mean very well considering what we were all afraid was going to be the case. But if you break it out by quartile, the top quartile had a spectacular year, and the bottom quartile in his data set actually lost money last year. So I mean, it was a year where it made a big difference whether you're a mature business or not. The other thing that he said that was interesting and kind of encouraging is a year ago, 12 months ago, he goes out with one of these quarterly surveys, and he asks MSPs, what are your growth projections for the year ahead? So this is pre-pandemic. And in aggregate, all of the MSPs in the database said that they were projecting 15% revenue growth in the year ahead. So then here comes a pandemic and a recession and everything else that's happened in the last 12 months. He goes out again 1 year later, asks the exact same question, and the MSPs in his group were projecting 15% growth in the year ahead. So this is good. And he, just looking at the actual revenue numbers that people collected last year, he sort of feels like it was kind of the proverbial V-shaped recovery. There was a very steep dip in Q2. And then you started seeing a return to growth in Q3 and beyond. And Paul was very careful to say that V could turn into a W, and we might see ups and downs. But the indications are basically that that we could be on the verge. Again, at least for the people who are good at what they do, at the beginning of a very good year for MSPs.
That's encouraging for sure. And I think that it's not at all surprising to me that the bottom struggles, and it's a little bit like what we talked about, with the partnerships and being able to come together to provide something more elevated, is the fact that, especially with security where it's at right now, it's a hard time to not be able to move fast. It's a hard time to not have the resources and scale to do the things right, and I think it brings advantage to organizations like Greystone. Doesn't make us better. It makes us, that's one of the parts of the success label that people like to throw around, that really is just timing, in all this. We are more suited because of, the fact that we started 20 years ago than because we started 2 years ago, and so we feel like, that we're very blessed by that. And also that we need to be stewards of that, in terms of continuing to accelerate that maturity. And I know a lot of the people in the industry feel the same way. So I think we'll see a lot of that come to fruition.
Yeah, good. It's a good time, I think, also to kind of highlight what we're going to be talking about next is because we're talking about trends and we're talking about small business, and we're going to be switching to an interview here shortly with Rieva Lesonsky. And we're going to be talking about the small business landscape and how small businesses view the channel. So I think that it's going to be a very interesting segue there. But before we switch to that, though, Rich, you said something that piqued my interest. You said it's a good time right now to be an MSP if you know what you're doing. And I was starting to think about that a little bit. Like, is there ever a time when it's good to be anything in business and not know what you're doing?
Well, that's a fair question. I don't know. I imagine I can't come up with a perfect example off the top of my head, but I mean, in gold rush conditions, right? Where, yeah, like, just everybody who goes into the market is going to find a buyer. Maybe in fact, that might be the perfect time to go into business and not know what you're doing, because you'll actually land some customers despite the fact that you're ignorant. But yeah, by and large, and it goes beyond entrepreneurship as well. It's better to know what you're doing than not.
It's true, but I will say, in 2001, it worked well for me. I didn't know what I was doing. It didn't maybe work out well in that year, but eventually.
So even if you don't make a very good hamburger, if you're the only one making hamburgers in a sea of 1 million people who are hungry, you will find success.
I think that was the early stages of our industry. All of a sudden in '95, everyone had computers on their desks for the first time. And I was 14, and I would be the one that, like, my parents' friends and would call to come set up their computers and fix their computers, because career business people didn't know how to do it. So it was true. Like, I had no idea what I was doing business wise, but it was that gold rush condition at that point. I think that's really what's changed now is, we've had times. I think we still have a lot of bad habits from that, but it's, yeah.
Very, very good stuff. Well, and I think that is a good time to make that switch over. So we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Rieva Lesonsky. She's the president and CEO of Small Business Blog and kind of a media company. She's a big author. She's written a lot of books, and she talks a lot about entrepreneurship. And she knows the small business landscape very well. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll be joined by her. We'll see you on the other side. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of ChannelPro Weekly. We've got an excellent interview guest lined up for you today. For over 30 years, she's been a small business and entrepreneurship thought leader, advocate, and journalist. She's written several books on the topic and is a contributing writer for several websites, including smallbizdaily.com. Please welcome the president and founder of GrowBiz Media, Rieva Lesonsky. Welcome, Rieva.
Thanks, Matt. It's great to be here.
Excellent to have you on. I kind of gave everybody a little high-level overview of you, but we'd love to learn a little bit more about who you are, your background, how you got to where you are today.
How I got here. I got here purely by accident. I'm a New Yorker. It snowed a lot one winter, and I said, I've had enough, and I moved to California. And I was just about to run out of money, and there was an ad in the LA Times. That's how long ago it was. There were ads in newspapers, and it was an ad for a research assistant, and it said Entrepreneur Magazine, and I had no idea what that word meant. I looked it up in my dictionary. It was not in there. Again, showing you how long ago this was. And this was pre-cell phones, and I said to my friends, here's the address I'm going. If I'm not back in 2 hours, come rescue me. And I went and I got the job, and then I left and came back. But for over 30 years, I was at Entrepreneur, most of the time as the editorial director. And then about 12 years ago, I was like, I'm going to go be one. And I started my own company, GrowBiz, and our own website, Small Biz Daily. And that's basically, I've spent my entire adult life covering small business and entrepreneurship.
Wow. So when you say you got there by accident, I thought it was going to be something like you bought a bus ticket and it went to the wrong place, and there you were. No. So very cool. So you've been covering the SMB business side and entrepreneurship for a very, very long time. You've written a couple of books. Tell us about that.
So I wrote a bunch of books when I was at the magazine, and my last book was 2 years old. It's called Small Business Hacks. That's 101 different hacks of what you need to do to start and grow your business. Things like, I mean, this is why it's so perfect. Entrepreneurs are basically overwhelmed people, right? There's nobody more overwhelmed than a small business owner. They don't have enough staff. They generally don't have enough budget to get everything done. And so we try to give them in the book some shortcuts of how to get things done without overwhelming them and having to, you know, go out and hire double their staff, which they can't afford to do anyway.
Well, sounds like an interesting past leading up to that. Now, about you personally, what do you do when you're not writing books and articles about entrepreneurship? I see you have several companies, so it looks like that's also one of your hobbies. But what else do you like to do? Paragliding?
No, well, let's see, I haven't done anything for a year. So no, I'm a big baseball fan. So love to watch baseball. I'm from New York, so I'm a Yankee fan. My husband's from Minnesota, so we basically watch Twins games. I think pitchers and catchers report in two weeks, so we're kind of excited. So I do a lot of rooting for baseball teams.
And do you go to a lot of games, or do you just watch on
No.
TV?
I have decided that you can see a lot more when you're home watching TV, and you can it's become a problem. Well, obviously in the last year you can't go, and I live in Orange County, so the only games I could go to are Angel games, and I don't particularly like to support the Angels. I don't philosophically agree with the owner of the Angels, so why would I give him my money?
That's an old adage. You don't go to a baseball game to watch the game. You go to drink beer and hang out with friends. If you want to watch the game, you watch it on TV. Exactly. Peter, do you like baseball? Are you a big baseball guy?
Yeah, you know, I grew up a Cubs fan. I lived in Indiana when I was young, and so Wrigley Field was, you know, that was kind of heaven to me. And so I'm in Colorado. I've been here since I was 10. So we got a team a couple years after, you know, I came here, and in Colorado, it's very much exactly what you just said. People go to baseball games because it's the best bar in town. And so occasionally the team's good. I love the sport, but I'm not as militant about it, you know, as I was when I was 9 and 10.
Awesome. Now, Rich, you live in Seattle. Do you go to the Mariners, or the baseball team up there, right? You go to Mariners games?
Oh yeah. I mean, ordinarily when they let you in the stadium, I have a friend here. The two of us have a fractional ownership of 2 season tickets. So yeah, in a normal season, I'll go to like a dozen games. And you know, and Rieva, I'm in exactly the same boat as you. I am a transplanted New Yorker in Seattle, so I'm a Yankees fan. But I'm going to Mariners games, and every season I'm always there for one of the Mariners Yankees games, and I don't know who I'm rooting for. And
it gets complicated.
I think in Seattle, Rich, if you wear a Mariners shirt and a Yankees cap, that's a criminal offense in Seattle, right?
I think you just spontaneously combust if that happens, I think.
Hey, one more personal note, Rieva, before we move on, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I'm under the impression that you run Grow Biz Media with your husband, and the two of you met at Entrepreneur. Not true?
Not true.
Okay.
No. I have a partner. I run it with my partner who I met when she used to work for me, but not my husband's retired. He watches baseball and does plants. I keep trying to get him. You know how plants are really hot this year? Actually, the last 3 years, greenery, succulents are really, really hot. If I would be mobile, I live like basically in a succulent farm, but he refuses to sell them. So like, we could make money from this stuff, but no.
Well, you know, the reason I was really excited to have you on the podcast with us, our listeners, our readers, they are 100% focused on selling technology products and services to small and mid-sized businesses. And those are the people who you write for. Yeah. So looking forward to kind of getting your sense, your sort of finger on the pulse sense for where the SMB world is right now, because that's going to have a very direct impact on what the year ahead looks like for our readers. We chatted a little while back earlier this week about that, and you said something that was kind of interesting to me. You described 2021 as a pivot year for small businesses. So talk about that a little bit. What is it about this coming year that you think will make this a pivot year for small businesses?
So basically, most small businesses have been closed or operating remotely for almost a year now, right? So this is the year that, and we don't know when things are going to open up, and it's different in every state. So that's a big issue too. So a lot of small businesses have found that this is the year they have to decide, am I going to stay remote? Am I going to go back into the office? What am I going to do? How am I going to do this? A lot of restaurants have switched to be ghost kitchens, for instance. So is that lucrative enough? Am I going to do that? Am I going to never open my restaurant again? So this is the year that a lot of small business owners are going to make that decision. And that decision, whichever it is, there's so much technology that is part of that, particularly remote businesses. I think that business owners went home last year, sent their employees home without thinking about the consequences of what this actually means technologically. And if people are going to make that commitment permanently, you got to think about, what does this mean? Security wise, hardware wise, there's just so many factors in that. And I just think so many business owners it's overwhelming and they don't even know where to start.
And do you have any sense at all for what has changed permanently and what might be going away? A lot of what small businesses have been doing for the last 10 months or so, they're doing because they really had no alternative.
Right.
But eventually they presumably do have options. What do you think has changed maybe for good?
I think that a big percentage of those businesses that were operating in offices, information type businesses, not retail, that's a separate issue, are going to pivot to permanent remote operation, which opens up a lot of doors to them in terms of one of the things that we've been telling people is you can now, if you're one of those kind of businesses and you're not requiring people to be in the office, your hiring pool just opened up tremendously, right? You could be in Colorado where Peter is and hire somebody in Maine and it doesn't matter. What matters is the technology to make all that seamless, but it doesn't matter if people are remote, they're remote. So that's one thing we're looking at. For retail, we're looking at a lot of retailers who maybe were a little reluctant before to pour so much of their business online, have done it, have liked it, and are now wondering, is it worth it? Is it worth it to pay for rent and pay for all those employees? Should I stay online or should I do some kind of hybrid? Again, technological needs. So much I think of what's going on this year with small business owners their success is going to ultimately depend on the technology that they can get to underpin everything that they want to do.
On the remote work from home piece of that, do you get the sense from your readers that they are at this point they have awakened to the fact that this is going to be just a part of how they do business indefinitely, and are they hungry for help with that from their IT providers? Like now that they kind of know I'm going to be doing this for a long time, are they looking for help in terms of how do I do it better, more securely, et cetera?
I think that there's a big percentage of them that, yes, okay, now that I'm going to do this, what do I do? But there's another fairly large size group that are like, I want to do this, I'm just going to do it. And they don't even know what they don't know. So they don't know enough that they should be concerned. They're like, oh, whatever, what can happen? And it's like, whoa, a whole lot can happen, particularly on the cybersecurity front. And they're not even aware of that. And so I think part of what we meaning people like me, the small business advocates and journalists, and that it's our responsibility to spread that word, to say to people, these are the things you need to keep your eye on. These are the things you need to be worried about. One of the things that several years ago, I was at a conference at Dell, and they were talking about how this was at the beginning of work from home. And they were just all concerned in terms of their employees about employees bringing their own device to work, right? Because people would bring their laptop to work and then bring their laptop home, and it would be on the kitchen island. And, you know, little Johnny would sit down and go do some kind of game. And the next thing you know, the network's infected. And the person at home is like, well, I didn't do anything. I just let my kid on the computer, you know? And so I think it's that, I still think awareness of that is not where it should be. And that's part of what we need to do.
Do you think that the challenges, you know, because I agree, you know, as a technology provider, we saw a lot of organizations who said, all right, now we've got to do all of this stuff in a matter of days. And they hadn't thought through it, and they paid the price, and they're still going to. Do you think that that's going to cause some people to say, it's just not worth it? Let's just go back to the office where we know how things are supposed to operate, and we don't have to learn anything new about these challenges?
So the easy answer would be yes, but I've been doing a project with ADP. You know, they monitor employees in terms of, and they've been polling people. And the problem is with what they're showing is a lot of business owners are like, yeah, it's not worth it. Let's go back to the office. And a lot of the employees are like, whoa, I don't feel safe. I'm not comfortable. I don't want to do that. And so that's really where I see a big conundrum developing in the next few months, where business owners are like, okay, we can't do this anymore. We're going to go back, and employees are like, I don't want to do that. And I think a lot of business owners don't know what to do with that. You know, you don't want to lose the institutional knowledge of all your employees. And employees are just not comfortable. They're just not.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that I can see employee sentiment driving a lot of that. You know, do you think that the initial benefits that a lot of us saw in the work, you know, the remote work, and we had an advantage because we're a technology company, so we had a lot of that set up already. You know, our employees have a lot of autonomy in terms of where they work and when and how. But we saw a benefit when everybody was at home. You know, we had a little bit more of a captive audience. It's easier when everybody's remote than when a third of the people are remote. Do you think that we're going to, you know, are we going to experience another side of some of those? You know, is there going to be a fall off if we have this remote work, you know, on into the future without changing, you know, how we address things sociologically and psychologically with our teams?
I think so. Just being remote raises a whole bunch of questions now too, right? So what does that do for employees? So when you're remote, you lose a lot of that in-person camaraderie, that the ability for people to collaborate, because everybody works differently, right? Some people like to go, you know, hole up in a corner and think by themselves, where other people are more collaborative and like to be in person and sort of, you know, bounce off each other's ideas. And so you have to address that, you know. So that's a whole bunch of, I mean, a lot of success of this depends on video tools, video conferencing tools. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that a lot of business owners know, okay, in terms of, oh, I can get on Zoom and do this, but what about beyond that? Like, how do you, all those Zoom, what are they, those Zoom bombings that were happening where people were popping in? Small business owners are just like, well, what am I supposed to do? Okay, I've heard about this. That scares me. I'm gonna keep away from that. And so I think, I you know, overall, and I was telling Rich this, I think the problem in the small business community is so many business owners don't know what to do and don't know where to get help because they've been told or warned, obviously incorrectly, that the channel, you know, a lot of them don't even know what the channel is, but they're like, the channel's not there for them. The channel, my business is too small. Nobody's interested in helping me. And so they don't turn to the channel. They don't know what to do. So, you know, I know people who are, their IT person is their high school son or daughter. And that takes you so far, but not far enough.
I think it's funny that you say that, because I think a lot of people look at entrepreneurs, people who aren't entrepreneurs, and they feel like we think we know everything, you know. And I think that the reality is when entrepreneurs talk to each other is that we actually think we know very little. We're just comfortable not knowing, you know.
Exactly.
And I feel like right now there's just so much more that we don't know, you know,
Yes.
that it's going to be interesting to see kind of where that falls out. And one of the things we experienced in moving to the remote workforce initially back in the spring was that everybody stayed very well connected because we all knew each other already. What we've struggled with is, you know, we've hired 10 people, you know, during this, and they've never had those in-person experiences.
Yes.
And so, you know, creating relationships is much different than sustaining relationships.
Yes.
You know, in the remote work. And I'm fascinated to see how that plays out, you know, over the next few years.
And you're right, because I interviewed an entrepreneur a few weeks ago who that was exactly their experience. They went home and they were, let's say, I can't remember the exact numbers, but they were a staff of maybe 7. And they basically doubled their workforce. So the new 7 people hadn't met the old 7 people. So when they got on a Zoom conference, the old 7, knowing each other, were like, yeah, chatting away, you know, kind of cementing that feeling of camaraderie, where the new people felt even more ostracized because it's like, what do I say? I don't know these people. Oh, you know, it makes it even more difficult for them to fit in.
Yeah, no, the social experiences are pretty manufactured, you know, and that does make it tough.
Yeah.
So Rieva, if you could look at your readers and what would you say that beyond what they don't know, and I kind of chuckled a little bit when you said it's you know, you don't know what you don't know, but the interesting thing about not knowing what you don't know is that it's tough to know what you should know when you don't know what you don't know, what you should know, you know?
Exactly.
But beyond what they see the future perhaps being, I think a lot of them have probably accepted, like, things are going to be different. We're going to have to do these different things, but there's still, because there's a lot of unknown, what do you think are their top fears as they push forward into this coming year? What are the big unknowns that have them worried?
Well, so the big unknowns are what happens, where's this virus going, right? Because we don't have any clue in the sense of when the world's going to open up again. So it depends on the kind of business you have. If you're a retailer, there are so many small retailers, right? So if you're a retailer and you're still in business, you obviously have pivoted to online, because it would be hard to be in business if you weren't. But that pivot to online is like, what are you using the right, you know, there's a lot of different software packages you can use to set up your online store. Are you using the right one? Are you using the right features? I think that's a big issue with business owners. They don't know if what they're doing is right, and they don't know if going forward it's time for a lot of financial analysis too, right? People are saying, well, it's going to be a hybrid. Almost every expert I've talked to the people at the National Retail Federation, who think that the demand is going to be so pent up for social interaction on a retail shopping level, that the minute that it's open, people are going to flood back into stores, and they're trying to tell people, if you can hang on, you're going to have a ton of business, because people are going to go out shopping just to go shop with a friend or shop with family members. So you have that information coming into you, and yet maybe you're sitting there going, it's not worth it, you know, and just the financial infrastructure, it's not worth it. If you've pivoted to online, you've probably opened up your audience, right? If you're a store, your neighborhood is this big. If you're an online store, your neighborhood is infinite. And maybe now you figured, okay, now that I'm going to do this, what do I do? How do I market myself? How SEO is, I get, and I don't even understand SEO, and I get so many questions. I just did a webinar a week and a half ago for SCORE, and there were like, I don't know, 1,200 people online, and I would say probably 60% of my questions were something about, how do I get noticed online? How do I let people know that I'm there? They don't understand SEO. And frankly, in the world of SEO consultants, they don't know who to trust. Like, I know people who've hired people and it's like, nothing's happened. What do I do now? So it's going to get more complicated, I think.
You touched a little bit on something there that I kind of wanted to get into with you, which is just, people weighing the financial implications of investing in some of these technologies and so on. I mean, early on in the pandemic era, our readers were very, very concerned about the willingness and the ability of their customers to pay them for technology services and technology products. And there definitely was a revenue impact for most of our readers, but maybe not quite as severe as some people were concerned. As you look ahead to 2021, and given some of the uncertainty that's still out there, like you say, I mean, how willing to spend, to invest, do you think your readers are going to be?
So all the surveys I've seen from outside people say that they are willing to invest in technology because they realize that the technology is what drives the business. And so while the hiring investment it's most people are saying, we don't know that it's going to happen, that they're going to stay the same, right? They don't plan to hire new people, but they don't plan to fire anybody either. So the big investment is they need to invest in their infrastructure, and that is technology. For all of, I mean, obviously, if you're a restaurant, you have to have some kind of physical structure. Even if you're a ghost kitchen, fewer staff, but you do need a physical structure. But most small businesses aren't restaurants. They're either small retail operations or they're, information based, where really the business is their employees in a computer. So it's about internet connections. It's about securing their information. It's about networking. They don't know. They think, maybe this can operate independently, where they don't realize the network is giving everybody access to everything. It's even about insurance. I think that, I know that's not what you guys are concerned about, but a lot of now, if you're home, what do you do about insurance? Like, who's covering this? What if somebody, what if there's a fire in somebody's house? What if, and that, again, that can threaten the network. So there are things that again, I'm talking to SCORE about, like, creating checklists of things that people need to be aware of so that at least they can arm themselves with the questions they need to ask.
So, Rieva, I have a follow-up question to that, because as an IT provider, and we also talk to a lot of other IT providers, we love the reports that say that businesses are willing to invest in technology. But if you talk to a lot of IT providers, the reality when we go to those businesses is that it's actually hard to get them to move the needle, and to open up their wallets. And I think part of the challenge of that is that IT departments, IT people, by nature are not always the most influential from the business perspective. They're very technically focused and not necessarily focused on, how to inspire somebody to understand the investment that they're making and the return they're going to get on that. What advice would you give to the technically minded people who are looking at that saying, yeah, we really know that the companies we're working with need to spend more. They say they're going to spend more, but they're not. How do we elevate our influence in those situations? So
I know that for years, I mean, going back years, we've always told people, don't buy for the technology you need today, buy for the technology you need tomorrow, right? Because presumably you're going to grow and what you may buy today is going to be inadequate. But I think in reality, that scares people, because when that's said to them, they think you're saying that, so I'll spend more money. So to me, it's about options. It's like tiered approach. It's like, if you instead of giving people, here's what you need to do, say, here's the problem you need to solve, and here are 3 different ways to solve it. Let's figure out what's the best way for you. And I think if you take the more collaborative, consultative approach, rather than more of a, this is what you need and this is what's going to make that happen, which scares people, because it's like going to the car dealer, right? The car mechanic. you don't know what's wrong with your car. So if the mechanic tells you this is what's wrong with your car and this is how much you need to spend to fix it, you're kind of stuck. You're like, okay.
Unless you buy one of those little code reader things that you stick into the dashboard, then you might actually know what's wrong.
See, and I don't know. So like, it's like, that's the issue. So I think if you take here, let's figure it out. Let's do it in steps kind of approach, that one helps. And two, it's about assuring people that you're not just there for the buy, right? You're not just there to sell and install a system that they're going to have to deal with if something goes wrong. And I know that that's, just as me, I have a company, one other person, my partner. I mean, we've been remote for 12 of the 13 years we've been in business. But when something goes wrong with my computer, I'm like, okay, what do I do? I just don't know, because I don't have a channel partner, because frankly, back when I started, nobody wanted to deal with a business as small as mine. And I don't have a lot of needs really, but right now for 2 weeks, I've been dealing with an email system that is not working. And I haven't had the time to go call my email host, which is going to happen today, to say, figure it out. You're doing it, figure it out. And so I think a lot of business owners are in my boat and they're looking for that partner. Everything I've seen is that small business owners are looking for collaborative partnerships. They don't want somebody to sell them something. They want somebody to work with over the course of time. So that's, to me, is the key. You'll be there when they need you.
That's very, very good advice. Unfortunately, we're going to have to cut it there. We can certainly go on. There's lots more to learn, and hopefully we'll get you back someday. So Rieva Lesonsky, if you can, tell us if people want to get a hold of you, find your books, where can they find you online and in person?
Well, you can always email me, Rieva, that's RIEVA @smallbizdaily.com, or I'm on Twitter @Rieva, RIEVA. So you can, I'm on all the social media, but really Twitter's the one where I pay the most attention.
You got your first name. I tried to get at Peter. It didn't work out very well.
When your name is Rieva and your father invented the spelling, it's a lot easier.
Yeah, Peter, you'd have had to get that one like the second day Twitter was in existence.
Yeah.
Well, smallbizdaily.com is the website you can go to. Thank you very much to Rieva Lesonsky, the CEO and founder of Grow Biz Media. Thank you for being here, and I thank you also for introducing me to the term ghost kitchen, because up until today I didn't know that we've proven the existence of ghosts, let alone the ability to saute them. So I am super excited about this, and they're probably served best with a nice béarnaise sauce. So thank you so much for being on. I hope we get you back. We are going to take a short break. When we come back, after I go get my ghost snack, we are going to finalize the show with Peter Melby here and go through some of our regular end of the show features. Rich will tell us what has been, what will be, and I do have a museum pick and tech pick lined up for you. It's going to be a lot of fun. You don't want to miss it. We'll be right back. And welcome back to part 3 of ChannelPro Weekly. Great interview with Rieva. Rich, anything or Peter, even you want to call out any highlights that you got out of that?
I think just the idea is that a lot of what we're looking at in coming back to this, we'll have to take stock of this year of abnormal circumstances, and that it's not just going to be snapping back, but it's also not going to be just moving forward as is. And I think that the other piece of it is just trying to figure out how to be more influential as an IT provider, when people are not used to IT providers being influential. And I love what she had to say about that.
Yeah, I think, very similar on my end. There were 3 things that all, from my standpoint, are relevant from a sales and marketing standpoint. One was her observation that there are a lot of small businesses out there who think they're too small to have an IT provider, which is not, I mean, there are, people listening right now who don't want to talk to anyone with fewer than 50 employees and so on, but there really is no business too small to have an IT provider. So something to keep in mind in your sales and marketing efforts. Similarly, she said, lots of people out there doing work from home who don't even realize what they're doing wrong, that they need help, and so on. So, I mean, there is a sales and marketing pitch there. And then also when she was talking about like retailers and so on, people taking the business online, and from the standpoint maybe of going back and doing that, in a better way now, or enhancing what you did quick and dirty last year, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity around that. So a lot of different ways you can kind of follow up on her input there and build that into your business development activities.
Very, very true. And we thank her for joining us again. It was a great interview. So, Rich, we're going to move on to our next segment. And you know what we have not done in a while?
What is that?
We have not had a good game or round of 5 questions in quite some time. And I think Mr. Melby would be, he's actually a little seasoned because we did a similar kind of thing at one of our events, but I think we should play 5 questions. What do you think?
Let's do it.
All right, Peter. So you're up for it. Basically the game is we are going to ask you 5 questions off the top of our head. That's what makes it fun and interesting, is that Rich and I, we don't write these in advance. We have to think of it on the fly, and we'll see what your answers are. There's no gotchas, nothing to embarrass you. It's just fun stuff to learn a little bit more about you.
Perfect. And I assume they're all about politics.
No politics. Sorry. Yeah. 5 questions other than politics. This is a politics-free safe haven for all of our listeners.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, Rich, I will put you in the hot seat and give you the first question.
Okay, and I'm trying not to ask any of the same questions I asked the last time we did this, but I have a hunch I'm going to wind up repeating. So you're in the Rockies, Peter. What is your favorite sort of winter time, snow outdoor activity?
So ice hockey is the best sport. Started playing that when I was in my late 20s, so I was real late to the game. But whether it's inside or pond hockey, it's a great stress relief. There's really no way to play hockey and think about anything else besides just the fact that you're on skates on ice and you have a stick and there's the puck. Because if your mind starts drifting to work and all that stuff and stress, you're going to pay for it.
All right. Question number 2 to me. I'll stay in the hockey theme because the NHL season has just kind of kicked off. Most teams have had at least a game or two. Rich is an Ice Hogs fan because that's the team I normally follow. I follow AHL because that's my kind of local team. Basically right now it is the Chicago Ice Hogs, which is kind of interesting because they have like 11 players from the Ice Hogs roster last year playing for the Blackhawks. So I'm not expecting much from the Blackhawks this year, but Peter, based on what you've seen, who's your top pick for the Stanley Cup?
I'll say the Avalanche because it's my team, and they're down the street. But this is actually the year where last year underachieved a little bit in the playoffs, but made a substantial impact. They're a super young team, and they have been. So this year, next year, I think we have a lot of opportunity, and it's we need some good, consistent goaltending.
And question 2A or 2B, I should say. Have you caught any of the Blackhawks highlights? Do you follow the Blackhawks at all?
I do moderately, but I have not really dove in this year.
So do you think they're going to be last place, second to the last, or third to the last this year?
It's a good question. I think that, I think they're that quintessential team that when you have success and the window closes, they could be last. I think but again, very young. To your point, a lot of young players, from the Ice Hogs that have come up, and so by the end, who knows? I think that the end of this year is going to be a lot different than the beginning.
Yeah, it is a very, very young team now. There's only a few veterans left from the glory days of the Blackhawks. So we'll just have to go and see. All right, Rich, quick question number 3 to you.
Okay, so I have a long history of asking the food questions on this, so I'll go to my old standby food question. You can only have one. You got to pick your favorite here. You can't say both. Burritos or tacos?
Burritos.
And why burritos?
Because I'm not a big fan of the tortilla or the shell. And in burritos, you get more substance inside to eat out of the tortilla. And then you can just leave that, on the plate, throw it in the trash.
A brilliant and logical answer. All right. Question number 4. What is the most crazy thing you've said to a fundraising child, Girl Scout, Boy Scout, or whatever, as an excuse why you couldn't buy what they were selling?
Oh, yeah, that's it's funny. So I started doing that intermittent fasting thing, and if there's that old joke. If you want to know about, how do you know someone's doing intermittent fasting or keto or any of those things? And it's like, well, wait 20 seconds and they'll tell you. So I don't love talking about it, but I don't eat before. I only have black coffee until 5 o'clock. And so the look on the face of someone who is selling gift cards is like, I don't eat lunch, and I haven't had lunch, in a long time. It's like, wait, what? For a child to comprehend that is like, well, why not? Like, what's wrong with you? And like, do your parents not feed you? Was kind of the response that I got there. Still, he still confused, I'm sure.
I love it. Awesome stuff. I was also hoping for something like, I said I couldn't buy what they were selling because an alien just took over my body or something like that.
Well, it's funny. I made a joke about being allergic to cats when my 13-year-old was 2. And so she grew up assuming that I was allergic to cats, and that's why she couldn't have one. And so I just let her, do it. And then during the pandemic, we got them a cat, which was like a hell freezing over kind of moment for our family. And, she was so excited. And then she turned around, she was just so worried that like I was going to have serious health problems because we got this cat. And I've had to slowly own up to the fact that I just lied to her when she was 2.
See, you've destroyed her whole future. It's years of therapy.
No, I got her a cat. She'll be fine.
Oh, good stuff. All right, Rich, last question to you.
Oh gosh. Let's see. Do you remember the very first movie you ever saw, and what's maybe the most recent movie you ever saw?
The first real movie that I saw as a kid that I remember like, oh yeah, this is what movies, should be, was Back to the Future. And the last movie that I saw was Back to the Future. So I've only seen, and I've only seen it once. So no,
it was that good. You were like, that's it.
Actually, one of the fun things during the pandemic was that the local movie theaters, you can rent the whole thing out for $100 and watch an old classic movie. So we took our 3 kids, my wife and I, the 5 of us went and saw Back to the Future in the theater, which was, that was pretty awesome.
Very cool. The first time I saw Back to the Future was in a theater too, and that was a pretty amazing movie to see in the theater. I thought for a second that like you only watched Back to the Future, and then like I've seen the movie of movies. They can't go any better than this. So why bother?
I do remember from our conversations before. I'm not a movie person. I wish I was. Some people would choose like invisibility, or teleportation, as their superpower. For me, it would just be being able to sit through a whole movie without doing something else.
You can't fight crime with that one, but maybe you can. You might be able to find a way. So, all right. Well, good stuff. Well, Peter, thanks for playing along. That was a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed our little segment of 5 questions. So I do have a quick museum pick and tech pick that we're going to switch to. So Rich, as for Peter, I don't know if you know this, but for most people who have been watching or listening for a long time know that I have an insane amount of old stuff around the house. Anything electronic, if it has a screen or plugs into the wall, I can't get rid of it. I don't know.
I've got a box of stuff in my garage for you.
Oh, I need to collect more. I'm already in the doghouse with my wife most of the time with this stuff. But I did run across in my cleanings and organizings a fun look back that, it's been over here for a while, Rich, and I always looked at it and it's like, oh, that's not really museum-ish. And then I actually thought about it and like, oh my gosh, this thing is like more than 10 years old. So I think I can talk about it. And my museum pick this week is, I'm going to hold it up on screen, but for those who are watching, it's a notebook computer. It's a kind of a black and silver accented. It's a Dell Xps M1530. So for those who are watching, open up here, but it's a big notebook. I mean, but at the time, of course, like this was svelte and small. And the reason why I thought this would be fun to talk about is because this was a pretty high-end notebook back in the day, Rich. The XPS line from Dell was like some of the top-of-the-line stuff 10 years ago. And it was smaller than it was before. But, if you compare it to the notebooks of today, it's pretty darn thick. It's pretty heavy. But it was advanced at the time. It has an HDMI port. And if you kind of think back 11, 12 years ago when this is, because this was, I think, 2010, HDMI was not a very common connector on notebooks. So because you can still see FireWire on here too.
Probably added $500 to the cost.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it wasn't cheap, but you got a couple USBs, you got Ethernet, you got an HDMI. Honestly, stuff that you still might find on a regular notebook today, although there is a TV output. You don't see those on laptops anymore. You don't see FireWire. And although you still can find VGA on business notebooks, you don't often see it on the svelte premium kind of models anymore. It's pretty much an aged connector, but a fun look. And if you want to know the specs here, Rich, it was a Bliss. No, this was the Centrino platform, by the way. Do you remember Centrino, Peter?
Yeah.
That was like the big deal, right? You got the Intel, you got the wireless, you got it all kind of roped together. This is a Core 2 Duo T7250. And honestly, Rich, the HP TouchMark we talked about on the on the New Year's show, the specs are oddly similar to that. So I bet this thing would boot, it'd still run okay. This one has a little less RAM though. It's 3 gigs of RAM instead of 4. DDR2, of course. Came with Windows Vista. Did have NVIDIA graphics built in, at least in this model. They sold it without it too, but this one has it. A 15.4-inch screen. This is WSXGA. I can't remember what res that is, but it's certainly not HD, but it's probably what was that? 1366 by 768, probably, Peter. WSXGA, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
200 gig spinning disk hard drive. Did have Bluetooth on it, and shipped with Windows Vista Home Premium. Good old Vista. That'll take you back. Did you have a laptop like this, Peter? You a big XPS fan?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I did, and I think that I said it's probably. I remember I bought a laptop similar to that. I think it cost $5,000. And it was like that was the business. Like we didn't even have an office like that. My business was just that computer. But it's fascinating how disposable things have become. Compared to that. And I remember going on the Dell website and just like you kind of geek out about like what's the most powerful system I can build, and then you see like $19,000, and you're like, wow, that'd be amazing. And then you see something like that, and it's pretty funny.
Yeah, I hope this one wasn't $5,000, but it was pretty expensive. I do know that. So that leads me into my tech pick, Rich, and I like to play a lot of That Was Then, This Is Now. And you know what? Dell still sells the XPX line of computers. So I thought, what the heck? Let's take a look at what a new XPS laptop looks like. And there it is right there. So spec-wise, honestly, I mean, it's more advanced, of course. The processor has changed a lot, but, this one had 3 gigs of RAM. This one's got 8. That's more, but it's amazing how far laptops have come, but it's actually interesting how far the internals haven't changed all that much. I mean, they're the processor is significantly faster, but if you look at the rest of the specs rounded out, they're still pretty similar. But this one's obviously a lot thinner, much bigger display, 16:10 ratio, and of course they spec this one out. I picked one that was reasonable. This one's $1,500. I mean, they have some of these that are $3,000-$4,000, Peter, as you said. I'll also point out here too that I do understand this naming convention of like computer products these days, because they sell the Dell XPS 15, and then they come out with a new model. So like creatively they call it the new XPS 15. That's actually its model name, is the new XPS 15. But what happens next year when they put out another new model? Do they rename this one the old XPS 15? Like, how is this good marketing? Peter, explain this to me.
It's better than appending the year to the version, and then releasing it the year after that, like Microsoft loves to do. So it's not great, but it's better than some others.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I can follow this, because it seems like calling anything new that will eventually be old, it's not a good idea to call it new.
Yes, you would think that people with a marketing budget, would call people like you and say, "Hey, does this make sense?" And you're like, "No, it definitely does
right?
not."
Like, just like go the Galaxy route. Call it the XP. We're on the XPX 12 now. Next year will be the XPS 13. Like, let's just make it easy to follow. But no, they do it on purpose, so that way they can sell the old XPS 15 for practically the same price as the new one. That's why they do it.
That's a good point.
So anyway, that's my museum pick, the Dell Xps M1530, and my tech pick, the new XPS 15 as opposed to the old XPS 15. Check that out there. Rich, I know we're coming up on a hard stop here for you, so please, real quick, tell us what has been and what will be.
Well, in terms of what has been, a great place to get that information every Friday on ChannelProNetwork.com is our In Case You Missed It post written by our own James Gaskin. This week there was actually more hardware news out there. There was a education technology the festival online, and we've got some hardware news from Acer and others out of that. A new role, a new job for Jim Lippy, formerly of Kaseya, who has been our guest on the show before. You can read up about that. And then this will make more sense and maybe, just maybe, sound a little bit better when you actually read about it. But James has a little information for you about a new gin from South Africa that is made with elephant poop. Don't
Sounds delightful.
It does sound delightful. Yeah. Unique cocktail opportunities around that. Now looking ahead to next week, I think I made a mistake on last week's show and previewed NerdioCon, the online conference from Nerdio, and I indicated that it was happening this week. And I probably did that because I spoke to some people at Nerdio this week about it, but actually the conference happens next week. And so there is still time to sign up for that if you are interested. Beyond that, I can't get into the specifics. I can't name names, but there's some BDR news coming. There's some security news coming. So stay tuned to ChannelProNetwork.com. We will be covering all of it for you.
And any chance you can preview what's coming up on Channel Pro Weekly next week?
Yes, I can. Actually, I'm still nailing down a guest host, but our interview segment will be with an executive from Cloud Checker. So this goes right back to what we were talking about in the show. We've got a cloud-specific, smaller, not startup exactly, but smaller, younger kind of vendor coming on to talk about this whole cloud management, cloud security scene.
Sounds exciting. You won't want to miss that, folks. Big thanks to our interview guest, Rieva Lesonsky, for joining us. And a huge thanks to Peter Melby for being our guest host today. Peter, I hope you had a good time.
It's great.
If people want to learn a little bit more about Greystone, a little bit more about you, get in touch with you, where can they go? How can they do that?
Yeah. GreystoneTech.com is the website. LinkedIn, just Peter Melby. Twitter, Peter Melby, not Peter, regrettably. And also have a website at bossorbabysitter.com for some of the culture talks that we do. So it's a different topic, but we'll do that someday.
And if you are the owner of the Twitter handle at Peter, I'm sure Mr. Peter Melby wants to talk to you. So get in touch with him.
I got a crisp $20 bill with your name on it.
Right away. Channel Pro Weekly is a show. Make sure you subscribe so you get new episodes as they come. We're at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Music, pretty much anywhere podcasts are found. If you like to watch, go to YouTube, find our channel, and make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you can get new episodes there. For all the stories we talked about, just open up the description area on YouTube or go to the show page at ChannelProNetwork.com, which is the website, and you'll get links to all of the stories there. And speaking of ChannelProNetwork.com, that is the website you want to go to each and every day for news, articles, blogs, white papers, downloads, resources, all kinds of great stuff that will help you make your business better, keep you abreast of the news, and help you make more money, which is the goal. Big thanks to my co-host, Rich Freeman. Big thanks to Peter Melby. Follow us on the social networks, and we will see you all in Channel Pro Weekly episode number 174 next week. See you then.